Good afternoon and good morning and good evening to everyone joining us from around the world. My name is Xinxin Zhang, and I'm the Research Data Librarian here at the Chinese University of Hong Kong Library. I'm delighted to be your host today. Welcome to Data Excellence Week 2026, organized and hosted by the Chinese University of Hong Kong Library. This annual event is a week-long celebration of effective data management and innovative data practices across disciplines. It highlights emerging trends that are shaping the evolving landscape of research data management. This year's program features an expanded lineup, including panel discussions, a keynote lecture, best practice sharing sessions, and student project presentations. In addition, we're broadening the scope by bringing together diverse perspectives on research data management from regions beyond Hong Kong. Today's online panel marks the official kickoff of Data Excellence Week 2026. We are excited to welcome participants from CHK, other institutions across Hong Kong, and many other parts of the world. The title of today's panel is Cross-Regional Perspectives on Research Data Management. We are honored to have three distinguished faculty researchers with us today. Professor Marilize Le Roes-Hill and Professor Terry Ip will share insights into data management practices within their respective research communities. Their presentations will be followed by a panel discussion facilitated by Professor Ngai. Before we get started, here are just some quick housekeeping items. This session is being recorded and will be shared on the CHK Library's YouTube channel later. During the panel discussion, please feel free to type your questions into the chat box at any time. Our panelists will address them during the discussion. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our speakers and facilitator of today's session. The presentations will begin once I introduce all of them. Professor Marilize Le Roes-Hill obtained her PhD in molecular and cell biology from the University of Cape Town, UCT, in 2005, followed by 3 years of postdoctoral research in chemical engineering at UCT and 2 years in the biocatalysis and technical biology research group at Cape Peninsula University of Technology, CPUT, under the mentorship of Professor Stephanie Burton. She is now an associate professor in biotechnology, Deputy Director of Applied Microbial and Health Biotechnology Institute, and CPUT's research focus area leader in bioeconomy and biotechnology. She serves as a review editor for Frontiers in Catalysis, Biocatalysis, session editor for Data in Brief, editorial board member for Annals of Microbiology, executive director for Gene Reports, and newsletter editor for the Royal Society of South Africa. Her research focuses on actinomycete diversity associated with different types of environments using various omics approaches, the discovery of novel natural products and industrially relevant enzymes, and the potential application of these enzymes in biocatalysis and in the biodegradation of natural and synthetic polymers. This work has resulted in national and international collaboration research networks, mainly on the European and African continents. Thank you very much, Professor Le Roes-Hill, for joining us from Cape Town, South Africa today. Professor Terry Ip is the co-director of data science of the Medical Data Analytics Center and the associate professor in the Department of Medicine and Therapeutics at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. He obtained his PhD in medical sciences from the CHK. During his PhD studies, he served as a visiting research fellow at the Department of Epidemiology and Public Health, University of Maryland in the United States. Professor Ip's research focuses on epidemiology, natural history, assessment, treatment, and clinical outcome prediction of chronic hepatitis B and metabolic dysfunction-associated steatotic liver disease. He has over 240 publications in peer-reviewed journals. He now serves as the associate editor of Journal of Hepatology, statistical editor of Clinical and Molecular Hepatology, and the editorial board of Clinical Gastroenterology and Hepatology, JHEP reports, and Elementary Pharmacology and Therapeutics. Professor Ip is also actively involved in various projects that leverage data science to address critical medical challenges. He's a recipient of CHK's Faculty Research Data Management Incentivizing Program Fund. Thank you very much, Professor Ip, for sharing with us today. Our panel facilitator, Professor Ngai To, is a professor in the Department of Chemistry and the Assistant Dean of Research in the Faculty of Science at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. He is also a fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry. Professor Ngai received his doctoral training in chemistry here at CHK. He subsequently undertook postdoctoral research at BASF in Germany and further postdoctoral training in the Department of Chemistry at the University of Minnesota in the United States. He later joined the Department of Chemistry at CHK and progressed through academic appointments to his current position as professor. Professor Ngai's research interests center on colloids, surface chemistry, polymers, and soft matter, with particular emphasis on understanding the fundamental physical-chemical principles governing complex systems. In addition to his research activities, he plays an active leadership role as the Assistant Dean Research in the Faculty of Science. He also serves as the Faculty of Science representative on CHK's Committee on Research Data Management. Thank you very much, Professor Ngai To, for facilitating the session for us. Now, I'd like to invite Professor Marilize Le Roes-Hill to begin by sharing her insights with us. Professor Le Roes-Hill, please go ahead and share your screen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just share my screen. There we go. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the organizers for the invitation to share some of the research data management practices that we make use of at our university, with specific focus on research data management practices in the field of enzymology, an area that I am involved in. I'm going to start off by introducing our university. So the Cape Peninsula University of Technology, or CPUT, is a fairly young university. It was established in 2005 with the merger of two historical technikons. The research takes place on 5 main campuses and within 6 faculties, and each campus basically focuses on a specific area of research. For example, science and engineering is based on our Belleville campus. Research at CPT fall within 6 different research focus areas, including bioeconomy, biotechnology, space science, engineering and technology, smart energy, the environment, climate change and sustainability, human health and social dynamics, and the digital society. So these are not meant to be research silos, but CPT encourages multi- and transdisciplinary research across these different research focus areas. For 2026, we have just over 40,000 students that are enrolled, with just over 3,000 representing postgraduate students and a complement of nearly 3,000 staff members. We are currently the largest university in the Western Cape province of South Africa, and we're also the only university of technology within the Western Cape province of South Africa. Our university's vision is to be Africa's leading smart university of technology, globally renowned for innovation with graduates that shape a better world. And our Vision 2030 then aims to build a one smart CPUT where the oneness focuses on human centricity, which is also referred to as Ubuntu in Africa, while smartness focuses on technological developments and innovations. Then, as defined in the Vision 2030, a smart university is further seen as one that successfully harnesses the potential of digital technology and connected devices, and the use of digital networks to improve people's lives through technology-embraced teaching, learning, research, and engagement in order to empower society. So within the context of a smart university, it is then clear why research data management is so important. So good research data management underpins research integrity, which also speaks to the CPUT values of embracing a culture of ethics and integrity. It prevents data loss, enables reproducibility, and increases the credibility and visibility of the research that is performed at the university. Without well-managed data, even technically sound experiments lose their long-term value. So good data management practices allows for data sharing, which in turn increases the likelihood of citation and scientific recognition. So research data management has also become a mandate, not only from our university, but also from our national funders, such as the South African National Research Foundation, which require that research data that's generated in projects that are publicly funded should adhere to fair data practices and thereby promote open science. So I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the principles of fair data practices, but just for a quick recap, for transparency and openness, we need to follow the fair data practices. Our work should be findable, so the data or information can be found through an easy search and or using a digital object identifier or DOI. It should be accessible. The data or information is downloadable. It should be interoperable. The data information can be read and used without the need for any proprietary software. And it should be reusable. So the data sets are accompanied with good metadata and is in a format that is then easy to use. I know this is a bit of a busy slide, but at CPT, researchers are encouraged to see that research data management should not be an administrative burden, but rather part of your core scientific responsibility. This slide is sort of an overview of what we aim to do at the CPT. Many aspects are still being developed. CPT libraries provide resources to staff members and postgraduate students to assist with all the different aspects or processes involved in research data management, including the development of a structured research data management plan. So a structured research data management plan and a rich, well-defined metadata that covers the entire data lifecycle from the planning stage through to the curation and evaluation of the data over time ensures data integrity, reproducibility, and fair compliance essential for good data management. So all staff and postgraduate students are required to prepare a data management plan for any new research that takes place at CPUT. And in this plan, we need to outline the specific learning objectives or goals, the type of data that will be associated with these, how the data will be organized, stored, secured, curated, and shared. For example, at CPT, we have the data repository Isango, which is a Figshare repository. And prior to graduation, all postgraduate students are required to upload their data to Isango, ensuring the availability of their data that then basically accompanies their thesis when it's published online. The data is reviewed by various staff members, including the Unit of Research Integrity, to ensure that it meets all the necessary requirements for fair data practices and open science. And the metadata provided is basically then essential, and it needs to capture things such as the who, so who did it, what was recorded, when, where, how, and in order then basically to make the data findable, understandable, and reusable. Without a structured metadata and a data management plan, data cannot be fair or reliably reproducible. Within our own research institute at CPT, so the Applied Microbial and Health Biotechnology Institute, there is a convergence of different disciplines. So not only in science, but also social sciences. We do a lot of work focused on the health benefits of indigenous plants and explore these plants based on indigenous knowledge systems for the development of products and or finding new health solutions. So as such, we not only need to comply with the FAIR principles of research data management, but also with the CARE principles. So basically the data that is generated must be to the collective benefit. Indigenous peoples must have authority to control the data that is generated and how it's being used. Those working with the indigenous people or the data have a responsibility to share how the data is being used while complying to human ethics, ensuring that indigenous people's rights and well-being is the primary concern at all stages of the data lifecycle. So besides the work that we do in health biotechnology, we also focus on microorganisms and as a source then basically of novel antibiotics and enzymes for application in different industries. So including looking at bioplastic production, wastewater remediation, and novel bioactive compound production. But for the purpose of this particular talk, I will only focus on two aspects of our research, which is the use of genomics data, and secondly, the data that is generated when working with enzymes. So just a bit of background. We work with a large group of atypical bacteria known as the actinomycetes or actinobacteria. In many ways, they look similar to fungi, but are classified as bacteria. But similar to fungi, they play a key role in various earth microbiomes and processes. And can often be used as bioindicators of environmental because of their value and impact on society. Bad, ugly, good, they produce other compounds with application in the food. The bad, because they can produce such as cave art, artworks, rubber, and many other substrates. And then the ugly, some are human plants or animal pathogens, and as such, we need to study the cause. These best isolate many of these strains from interesting environments, trying to find new species with new chemistry, especially new enzymes. And once we've sampled these different environments, we typically learn more about the organisms of interest through the use of different omics techniques, including metagenomics, where we sequence the total environmental DNA to try and understand the greater population of microorganisms present in an environment. And with genomics, we focus on sequencing and analyzing the DNA of an individual strain in order to access the genetic information for cloning and expression or to access enzymes. Any researchers involved in the generation of data from techniques such as genomics and metagenomics have very clear guidelines that need to be followed. So data management practices for multi-omics data are clearly defined by the International Microbiome and Multi-Omics Standards Alliance, as well as the Genomic Standards Consortium. But there are still challenges faced by the community. So even though all of these clear guidelines are available as to the type of data that should be collected, the format of the data, and how the data should be described, and how it should be made available to the research community for reuse, some studies do slip through, but it's usually published in obscure or low-quality journals. Here is an example of one of our publications focused on a genomic data set from an actinomycete. Journals such as Data in Brief focus on the description of the data that is generated rather than interpretations or conclusions drawn from the data, and serve to make data more visible within the research community for the purpose of reuse. As such, peer reviewers must have access to both the raw and the processed data in order to determine whether the study that is being reported or the data set being reported meet the specific standards in the reporting of genomic data. In this case, the raw sequencing data was made available via NCBI as part of a larger bioproject with an accession number that is being assigned. So the data can be accessed by searching that accession number or searching for this particular name of the organism. So there are various ways in which you can access the raw data. While all the processed data were then made available via Mendeley data, the digital objective identifier assigned to the Mendeley data was then also captured in the CPUT Isango data repository, making the data both visible and accessible via multiple databases. However, when we then take our next step in our research, which is to use the genomic data to access and produce new enzymes, we start to realize that there is a problem in the field of enzymology, which is mainly linked to the type of data that is generated, how the data is captured and shared. So anyone working in the field of enzymology soon realizes that reproducibility especially when working with biological systems, can be a major problem if there is a lack of metadata and detailed methodology. So over the past few years, there have been reports of the reproducibility crisis across all disciplines, regardless of if it's in social sciences or in science. Researchers have been raising the concern that work reported in literature is not reproducible, and it's often linked to a lack of detail provided or a lack of access to raw or processed data, or applying practices which could manipulate results and speak to a specific objective. So then some of the main threats to reproducibility in science are the lack of robust data and the presentation of manipulated data, as well as the lack of transparency and openness in the sharing and reporting of the data. So even if you have data that is negative, that is also something that needs to be shared. And basically, the credibility of any scientific claims is rooted in the evidence supporting them, and aspects such as the details regarding the methodology employed, the data that you collect, both positive and negative, the process used to implement the methodology, and how the data analysis was performed, and interpretation of the results should all be clear and accessible for peer review in order to promote open science. However, in enzyme research, we are typically seeing a lack of robust data and details pertaining to the methodology employed. In a study by Wittig in 2014, it was found that 300 randomly selected enzyme articles lacked specific details, where nearly a third did not report or contain any protein or gene identifier, which is basically the core of an enzyme paper. A quarter contained incomplete reaction descriptions, with others not even indicating the temperature at which enzyme reactions were measured, or they mention the term room temperature. This is a term that means something completely different depending on where you are in the world, and even from laboratory to laboratory on the same university campus. And in a related study, it was also found that articles published in well-renowned and respected journals also lack this key information. So even though the study was reported in 2018, the problem still persists. So how can we then, as researchers in the field of enzymology, ensure that the work that we report provide necessary information to allow for reproducibility? So there are guidelines that are in place. The Strender Commission, which focuses on the standards for reporting enzymology data, was founded in 2004 and is supported by the Ballstein Institute in Germany. Strender aims to define the minimum information required for the reporting of enzyme functional data, as defined in their guidelines, which is the list level 1A and 1B, and to generate a database for the storage of freely accessible data in the form of Strender DB. So here's just an example of an extract from Strender Guidelines Level 1A, which is focused on the experimental details. This particular example just shows you key aspects that should be recorded when storing the enzyme of interest. A lot of people don't even record this at all during their studies. Other aspects that are covered in the Level 1A form include information about the enzyme, how it is prepared, the assay conditions, activity reporting, and the methodology that is used. The guideline Level 1B then basically focus more on how you report the data, so including what would be required for different types of data that has been generated when describing the new enzyme. So with Strender DB, the data that you then generate by following these guidelines can be captured via a graphical user interface. A report is generated indicating compliance with the Strender guidelines, which can be submitted along with your manuscript, highlighting the robustness and vigor of the data that is presented in the manuscript. Along with the report, a digital object identifier is generated to allow for easier access to the metadata and the data that has been submitted. And once the manuscript is then published, the data is then distributed to public databases such as UniProt and ExploreEnz and PubChem. The data can also then be linked to enzyme databases such as Brenda and SabioRK. The main problem, however, to this is that this approach is not being enforced within the enzymology community, and only a few journals have made this approach a recommendation, and it's not currently a requirement. And then there are still some potential pitfalls. During standard biochemical assays, or how we determine the enzyme activity, basically this data is used to generate the data that's uploaded, or this approach is used to basically to generate the data uploaded to StrenderDB. Now, with the biochemical assays that we do, it typically results in a large data set, and we capture this in Microsoft Excel. However, manual sorting and processing can introduce errors, thereby hampering the reproducibility and data integrity. And linked to this, there is often limited metadata that is captured, for example, what the reaction conditions are or the enzyme concentrations used. The resulting data sets are then often non-interoperable, they are not fully accessible, and they are non-machine readable. To address this, the University of Stuttgart developed the Enzyme ML platform. This consists of a suite of Python scripts that automates biochemical data analysis, and it intelligently then applies the metadata. It can be used to analyze different types of data that is generated and allows for the application of multiple computational enzyme models. Ultimately, the output that you get from this process is a markdown file, which allows researchers to follow the FAIR principles of open science. For example, by uploading to SabioRK and StrenderDB, you can make the data findable and accessible, while as a markdown file containing metadata and data, it is interoperable and reusable, thereby not requiring any proprietary software for visualization and reanalysis. So the Enzyme ML team, which includes myself and another colleague from CPT, as pictured in the photograph, consists of both bioinformaticists and experimentalists, allowing for the continuous evaluation and then development of the Enzyme ML suite. For experimentalists, there is currently 5 Enzyme ML tools, each with their own degree of complexity and flexibility. So PyEnzyme may be the most flexible, but it requires Python coding skills, which a lot of experimentalists are not very comfortable with. But for those who prefer a graphical user interface, the team is busy developing the Enzyme ML suite, which will make it easy for researchers to input or upload their data directly from the analytical equipment for processing. Then there's also specific tools linked to specific measurement equipment, such as the MTP handler for data generated using a microtiter plate reader, ChromatoPy for HPLC data, and NMRPy for data generated using NMR. So here is then just an example of the Enzyme ML suite with the capture of the metadata from experimental setup. So this is then information compliant with Strender guidelines. And with the measurements, data analysis, and visualization can then all be performed within the Enzyme ML suite. All data is then exported in that XML format and uploaded to databases such as SabioRK and StrenderDB, thereby fulfilling all the requirements of the FAIR principles of open science. So in conclusion, it is clear that technology alone is not enough. We may have guidelines and tools to assist us in data management, but improving reproducibility requires a cultural shift in how researchers plan their experiments, record the data, analyze the results, and share their outcomes. Research data management and reproducibility must be embedded into everyday research workflows, training, and supervision practices. And while enzymology currently faces serious reproducibility challenges, there is a clear and achievable path forward. We just need to find a way to get the community to adopt the FAIR principles, following Strender guidelines and using tools such as StrenderDB and Enzyme ML. This will then ensure that researchers can significantly improve the transparency and reproducibility and long-term value of enzyme research, while also fulfilling the mandates of their funders and research institutes. And with that, I wish to thank everyone in my research team involved in actinomycete research and enzyme research, my collaborators and research funders, and the organizers of this event. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Le Roes-Hill, for your sharing. Thank you again. Now I'd like to invite Professor Terry Ip to begin by sharing his insights with us. Professor Ip, please go ahead and share your screen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen first. All right. So first of all, thank you very much for the kind invitation from the CHK Library. And I think it's my pleasure to always share with my colleagues and staffs or even students about like how we can effectively handle our research data. And I think the whole slide stems from some experience, sometimes can be painful experience when we talk with or discuss with other colleagues and students from the medical schools. So today I will try to use one of our examples to show you how we will see research data management in our domain, and also hopefully that will be helpful to your own field too. Okay, so first of all, I'm from the CHK Medical Data Analytics Center. So we set up the centers around 6 years ago, and this is our office. And if you are interested in our work, so feel free to visit our website, and we will regularly update our news and also our events. So hopefully we will have a chance to work together in the future. And in our data center, we usually handle or analyze clinical data. And in Hong Kong, we have the Hospital Authority, which is a government body who handled or who manage all the public hospitals and clinics in Hong Kong. And all the public hospitals and clinics in Hong Kong, they share the same electronic healthcare systems, and we call it CDAS, CDARS. And the government has taken the initiatives to allow researchers in higher institutions in Hong Kong to make use of the data from Hospital Authority to perform big data research. So here are some possible ways that we can access the data from Hospital Authority, including CDAS. If the staff works in the hospitals, they can access the CDAS directly. Or if they work outside the hospitals or in other domains, for example, researchers from computer science, data science that who also want to make use of this big data to generate some impactful research. So the Hospital Authority also have some initiatives like the EHP-DCL, as shown on the right-hand side, that allow other researchers from higher institutes in Hong Kong to access to Hospital Authority data. And I think the strengths of using this kind of data would be the size and also the velocity of the data gathering. So I here also highlight other parts of the world or other regions to also have their own insurance database or own electronic healthcare records. And the researcher from their own regions and countries, they can also use their own EHR for very impactful research that they can think of. And I think this also provide very timely data for some emerging situation. Like a few years back then when we faced COVID-19, this kind of electronic health records also gather the information from the patients quickly so that we can understand the patient better in a short period of time. And data are reusable, so because the EHR data will be accumulated throughout the time when the patients come back for clinical visits, and the data will not collect based on a specific study protocol. So usually researcher can make use of data to establish different kind of study cohorts with a large sample size, and also improving statistical powers and allow for studies on some events that take a longer time to observe, for example, cancer. And some other advantage would be they are considered an important source of real-world data. So we will make use of this data that can represent a wider spectrum of patients that we usually include in randomized control trial. And this kind of data or findings that when we discover, usually we find it more readily applicable to our routine clinical practice because those findings are generated from the patient that we see every day in our clinics. And nowadays, more and more researchers have the expertise in data science or data analysis using R, Python. So this also establish some possibility that more and more researchers can make use of these kind of big real-world data to generate important research findings. But usually when I talk with my colleagues and students in the medical school, they found that there are some hurdles when we want to use EHRs for clinical research. And I think today I will focus on the first one, which is the huge amount of data. So usually that require some programming skills and data management skills, which is today's topics and focus. And these are simulated data. It is the raw data formats that we usually see from the electronic healthcare record database. And there will be multiple rows of informations and multiple columns of informations. And usually there will be a lot of these kind of files, and each of them can be a very long or very wide file. So you will imagine there are a lot of data, and we should be able to have good data management skills in order to make sure that we analyze the data correctly, or the spirit would be to maximize the data use while minimizing some systematic error that we may have during the data planning stage. And these questions are usually what I discuss with my fellow colleagues and also some data scientists working in other domains. So usually we will think of if we're still having our data, if someone left our lab, so for example, I hire a research assistant, and after a year, he or she left our labs. So can we understand what she or he is working on, and can we immediately use his or her data set for ongoing research? And this also happened to our own selves. If I do a project a year ago and then I put the data aside, and after 1 year, I found that I want to use the same data set for some additional analysis. Can I do that? Or I have to, or maybe I have a headache because I forgot everything that I did last year's. And the final one would be like very painful. How about if your laptop is broken and you lost your only copy of the data set? So that would be very painful because you may have to start from the beginning. So of course, we also usually collaborate within the medical schools. So we as a data center, we also offer some like statistical consultations and also some support of data analysis. So I think having good data research, data management can help us to effectively collaborate, or at least to communicate well with our colleagues or between data scientists. So what each columns will represent, and how the data scientists to understand each of the columns. So with a good README markdown or with a good data dictionary, that will be very helpful. And at the end of the day, when we do research, we hope that our research findings are more like generalizables and can be applied to different patient populations. So usually we have to collaborate with other data center or other medical centers, other hospitals, so that we validate our research finding in other centers. So in this sense, so we have to share the data usually with our friends from other hospitals. So if you have good research data management, that can ensure that we can communicate well and to facilitate the whole things. So I think Professor Marilize also cover a little bit on this one. So I think this is everyone of you will agree that RDM, so research data management, is very important, and there are a lot of benefit if we take care of this one, because we can plan ahead the finance and the human resources. We can also ensure the fair data principles as mentioned just now. And also we have to provide a record so to let the others know what we are doing. And also sometimes the funders and also the institution may expect you to have a good documentation of RDM so that they can have a good understanding that you are using the data correctly, for example. And facility collaboration, of course. And finally, I think it's also very important to save time. So sometimes if you don't plan well about your research data management, you may have some headache when, at the later stage of the research project when some errors, for example, happen. You find that one of the data or one of the particular column is wrongly input. So you have to trace back what's happening between and which step I was wrong. If you don't have a complete log sheet, for example, to every step that you have done in the process, so you may lost track, and that will be a very painful time that you may have to start again for that particular column. So I'm very thankful indeed for the CHK library, because I always visit this website to understand better how I can manage my research data. And in particular will be the data management plan that I use quite a lot. And when in our medical schools, we usually do clinical study with this kind of several steps. So when we collect data from the electronic healthcare records, we have to retrieve the data like bit by bit, so it cannot be collected all at once. So because there's the bandwidth limitation, so we have to have good organization of the raw data, so that when we collect them step by step, we don't lose track at the middle. And after collect data, of course, we have to do data cleaning, followed by some exploration, maybe imputation if there's some missing data, followed by data analysis. And I think all of these information can be mentioned in the data management plan, so that you know what you are going to do. And when you plan these things, you will maybe find some loophole that you may have forgotten to think of, for example. So you don't want to miss those important points, or you don't want to discover those points only when you come to that stage or at the middle of the project. So research data management plan would be helpful to plan everything ahead. So I also learned this one from the CHK library. So what I learned here would be like data life cycle goes hands in hand with the research life cycle. So usually before I have a very systematic documentation of the research data management, I only focus on the left-hand side. So I will do my research, and my focus is mainly how I can analyze my data well, or to facilitate the subsequent publication. But now, with the data lifecycle, I think the reproducibility of the project will be improved a lot. And later on, when I want to reuse the data, for example, when I submit the data to the journal, and then they ask for some additional analysis, I can do it more easily with good research data management. And the data storage also very important. So it happens during the project life cycles when we want to do analysis, and then we save our output that will involve multiple storage. So this is the first thing. And the second part that require a lot of data storage will be after the project is finished. So how we can organize the data well, so that after a while, when I revisit the folder, I can understand what all those data are, and then I can use it again. So I think these are the experience that I have after I think more about research data management, be like data storage, how we should plan ahead. These two I think are very important aspect that we should think of. And this is the DMP tool. So this is a suggested tool by the CHK library. So I think this is quite useful because the CHK library also have their own template to use the DMP tool. So that involves a few questions that you have to answer. So in order to have a good research data management. And I think those questions are quite straightforward. And those are also very important checklists that I have to make sure that I have already think of them before I start a project. So usually I will try to go to register for a DMP using the DMP tool. And here's the QR code. So if you're interested, you can also try yourselves. And if you are students, so I think this is also quite relevant to you, because if you are admitted in this year or thereafter, you will be needed to submit a DMP. So this applies to my own student also. So that's why I found that recently some students also come and ask me about the data management plan. I think this is a good thing. It's a good initiative, because for example, in my department, so they have to submit an DMP prior to their qualifying examination, which will be around the middle of their PhD. So I think this will be helpful to plan earlier, so that when they perform their own projects, so during the second half of their PhD study, that will be like facilitate everything. And so usually the data management plan start with something very simple, some very factual things. So you just need to specify your title and the grounder also, because CHK, the DMP2 will give you some template that is tailor-made for a certain grounder. But if you don't have a certain template for your grounder, you can also use the CHK template. And very few information is needed about your project. So usually it's only about the abstract and also the project duration and the grounder. I think this will be more than enough about data management plan, because it's mainly about how you're going to store, how you're going to handle your data safely. So for the project detail, that will be like limited to the abstract and also the duration. And I think this part is very important. So similarly, when we do clinical studies, we have to apply for ethics approval, of course. And when we apply for ethics approval, we also have the same thing about the contributor. So who are the principal investigators, who are the co-investigators of the project? Because I think this part is very important, because you will have to understand who is responsible for a particular project. So you can understand in our data center, so there can be multiple projects that is ongoing at the same time. So sometimes if you don't have good documentation, you have to think, you may have a headache when you think of who is responsible for a certain project, and you have to find some of your students or some of your colleagues that have the data. So if you have a good documentation, that will help us a lot. And here are the contents that we should think of when we draft the data management plan. So data collection, backups, selection, and preservation. Data sharing is also important parts that I just mentioned, and how you are going to document your data, and whether you have applied ethics approval, which is one of the most important things that we should do for clinical studies. So every clinical studies, of course. And finally, the responsibility. That would be like, who are the person that we should find regarding the data. So just give you some like background. So for example, this project that I use as an example is about HBV. So this is a chronic liver disease that affecting quite a lot of people in Hong Kong, like 5.6% of people in Hong Kong is affected by this HBV infection. And if the patient have HBV infection, they are also at a higher risk of death from liver cirrhosis and also liver cancer. And at the same time, meso, so we used to call this as fatty liver. It's also a very prevalent chronic liver disease in the whole world. And the prevalence is quite around the same, I would say, from the Western world and the Eastern world. So including Hong Kong, the prevalence is right around like 30% or 30-something%. So you can imagine like around 1/3 of our adult population also have this chronic liver disease called fatty liver, or now we call it meso. And this project is about like, so how these two chronic liver disease can affect the patients. For example, if the patient have both HBV and meso, so if the patient have HBV and fatty liver all together, so what will happen to that patient? So this is a data management plan related to this kind of project. So this is a usual look of the data set that we have for our study. So usually we will have a lot of rows. So usually one row will represent one patient, and we will have identifiers to identify the patients, and then different attributes of the patient. For example, their age, their sex, the presence of some important disease entity, including cirrhosis, like diabetes. And this one is about the presence of HBV and also meso. So I also have a column about whether the patient have fatty liver or not. And there are usually some blood test data, like ALT is a blood test about the liver enzymes. And usually we perform cohort study. So cohort study means longitudinal study. So we will follow the patient for a while to observe the occurrence of some outcomes of interest. For example, in this project, we are interested in the development of liver cancer. So we want to know whether for patients with HBV, if they also have fatty liver, will they have a higher risk of developing liver cancer, for example. So in this kind of data set, we will also document whether the patient developed liver cancer eventually, and if yes, so when they did divide, when do they divide develop the HCC, the liver cancer here. So there's also one column for the years. And regarding the patient data collection that we should mention in the RDM, that would be like the data source. data type and also the proposed folder name and structure. The proposed data folder name and structure is very important. So for reproducibility and also for reuse, so you can understand what you're doing later when you revisit your data. And data source is also very important. So you have to highlight where you're going to get the data, because this also will affect your budget. So because for example, in the hospital authority data that we use, some of the data source that would require some data retrieval costs. So we have to pay for the cost to the hospital authority. So make sure you mention about the data source, and that will be helpful to the planning of the budget also. So how many costs that we would expect from such a data source and the size of the data. And we should also outline the source, the choice of the data format. So different kinds of data extension formats that you are going to store, for example, numeric data, the blood test results, and also your programming coding and the figures, for example. And backup is also very important because you don't want to lose everything or in the middle of the project. So make sure that you have good data backup. So usually people may upload the data to a cloud service if there's no privacy issue, but if there is a privacy issue, you make sure that you have mentioned that in the ethics approval and discuss with the ethics committee that whether it is possible after, like, for example, anonymization of the data or de-identification of the data. So, or you at least should have like some server device that have the backups to make sure that the backup is really pretty safe. Or you may have your own server, then you can also store it in your server with automatic backup. That would be also very helpful to make sure that the backup is still here, even the electricity is off, for example, if there's an automatic backup, so you will still be able to trace back the previous version pretty close to today, for example. And for light selection and preservation, that would be to decide what kind of patient data will be retained or will be destroyed after the project. So this is also a very important aspect. We also need to mention the same thing in our aspects approval. So we have to decide which patient data to keep and for how long. And so I think in the data management plan, we will also highlight this as an important aspect to be think of carefully before the start of the project. And for data sharing, so it will be like how and whom and where that you are going to share the patient data. And again, so of course you have to make sure that you mention the same thing in the ethics approval to confirm with the ethics committee that is possible to share. And the method, I think, is usually depends on the type and the sample size and also the sensitivity of the patient data. And if necessary, we usually like have to draft some data sharing agreement with our collaborators, to make sure that they have sufficient confidentiality protection to the patient data, and also make sure that they are only going to use the data for a particular project, but not to misuse the data or to use the data in other project that is not authorized to be used. So I think for data sharing of patient data, we have to be very careful. So first of all, about the protection of the confidentiality, and the second thing is about the consent. So whether if you're going to share the patient data, you have to make consents with the patient. So the patient will agree to share the data. It's the things that you must ensure before you do so, or otherwise, even for the ethics approval, they will not agree. They will not allow you to do so anyway. And for documentation and metadata is also very important. So usually data dictionary and also a markdown to describe what are those data and help the people to understand it or reuse it. And I think for the README, I think I usually include like who create and who contribute to the data, the title, the day of creation, and also under what condition it can be accessed. So this will be a very important information to be included so that the others can understand the accessibility of the data and not going to misuse the data again. And this is a kind of data dictionary that we usually keep for each of the projects. So we will describe each of the variables in the data set that I just showed you, for example, and describe it and what are the units, and what will be the typical values that we will include in those columns, for example. That will make sure that we can understand the data set, and not when there's a problem, we can always go back to the data dictionary to see whether we define the data correctly or not. And then for ethics and legal, I think this is one of the most important things that we should think of. So whether we are protecting our patient data well, patient privacy, personal informations, and make sure that you have applied for ethics approval before you start everything. And formal consent, so as mentioned just now, also very important. And also mention the restriction needed for data sharing. And also make sure password protection, restrict access to authorized personnel. So these are also what we will also mention in our ethics approval. So this is again highlighting the research data management. And then a responsibility would be like just now I will also mention about this would be like we have to make sure that who is responsible for the data capture, and also data storage, data backup, and the quality of the data. So whenever there's some like misunderstanding or you don't understand the data, so you can always find the person who are responsible to make sure that we understand the data correctly. And I think it's very also another important thing would be like about the software. So when we plan our research data management and also plan our research study, so we have to think of the software that we are going to use. This also related to the budget. For example, some of the software, when you purchase the license, so you also have to pay. And then finally, a good thing about the research data management plan would be they allow you to have the IDs so that you can cite your DMP. And this is my summary. So I think, first of all, I try to illustrate to you. So in Hong Kong, so the medical school, we all use a lot of data from hospital authority. They offer different opportunity to access their data. But to do this kind of data, or in general, do clinical studies, so we should plan the study early with a data management plan. And also the CHK library provide good support for data management plan. So make sure that you visit their website to have a good understanding of what is data management plan. With that, thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Terry, for your sharing. So let me turn on my camera. Thank you again, Professor Yip. And now it is our faculty panel discussion session. For our online audience, if you have any questions about the two presentations you have just heard, please feel free to type them into the chat box. Our panelists will incorporate your questions into the discussion. Now I would like to invite Professor Ngai to facilitate the panel discussion. Thank you very much, Professor Ngai. And all three professors, please turn on your cameras now. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Qing Qing. And then I think thank you for Professor Le Roes-Hill and then also Professor Terry, yes, the sharing. One focus on the biotechnology, this the application and then how this data management, and then also Terry share a lot about it in the clinical research, how the important of the data management. I think the one thing is the data management become combined with the funding agency, and then at the same time, many in the new publication, they also did the requirement of this the data management. So maybe I'm looking for the chat box if any the audience have the question. I based on that. But before I start, maybe I can ask Professor Le Roes-Hill. So in your university, do you have any policy that means how to encourage the research postgrad student to earlier engage in this data management? Although we know that this is one of the compulsory at the university, all this research postgrad student, they lead this data management, and then for the good. Do you have any new policy to encourage them to engage at the earlier time at your CPT university?
It is very difficult. Even though the younger generation is quite keen on technology, I think additional information that's required early on in their projects, they kind of find it a bit tedious and they don't really want to do it. But we try to basically show them the importance of what happens. So we give them examples of what happens if you just leave? For example, what Professor Yep said, if you just leave and then we can't do anything with your data. So we try to give them these examples, and there's always those funny cartoons that you also see where people is requesting somebody else's data and then they go, but where is the data? And then they say, but how do you use the data? And we try to basically encourage them at an early stage. So when they start with their proposal writing and when they need to do their ethics application, we try to basically then just encourage them to also think about what the impact of their study will be if you do all this work and then you don't have access to the data at the end, or make it available to the community for reusability. But yeah, it is a struggle sometimes. Not everybody wants to do it, but we try our best to encourage it. Yeah.
Yeah. So how about this? Any policy at your Faculty of Medicine at Terry?
I think we just follow the general policy of the whole university. So just now I also mentioned, so starting from this school year, the university start to make it a compulsory thing for the students. So I think some of the students is quite worried about that, but I just try to talk to them and say that actually it is good for you, it's good for your projects, and it's kind of a way to like force you to think about how you're going to perform your project at an earlier stage, or otherwise you may have some problems that run through doing the project, and there may be more problematics than you may think of. So try to encourage them to do so. And it also depends on the nature of the project, because some of my colleagues, they also work, for example, on LLM, the large language model. So they are developing some data set as a benchmark for future training of the LLM, or how to evaluate certain things by the LLM, or evaluate the performance of LLM on certain kinds of works. So in this kind of like benchmark things, or they're creating a data set for the others to reuse it for training. So I think this is particularly important if they stick it with a research data management plan, so that
yes.
that can include the improve a lot of the credibility of the data, and also this I think that this can be considered as part of the whole publication too.
Yes, I think yes. I think that maybe we need to have some of the good example and then to show to the student either in your research group, and then how this the earlier planning and then good data management, and how can be facilitate all their research progress, and then this is maybe one thing they can encourage the student. I think this always we also find it difficult, even also in our university, and then so this is also why we set such kind of this the workshop, and then also many different activity to promote this the data management. So I guess one of the question in the chat box, I guess, is regarding for the security or confidence or confidential or private some the privacy information. There's with the question for the Professor Le Roes-Hill. The question is regarding for about this the how any control, particular control of the data sharing, the particular some of research data. That means when you have some collaboration with the overseas, and then when you have one go to the publish in the paper, and then do you in some this Africa, do you have some of this export control the data, how do they shared out of the clinical research data? I guess this question is regarding for the security, some of the private data sharing issue in there.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I'm not really in the clinical research area, but I suspect that you would need, there is specific guidelines in how you can share and export this particular information. We also have the POPI Act or POPIA Act in South Africa, which basically defines the use of personal data. And this will then basically also determine how you can share that particular data, ensuring that the personal data of the patients is not basically exposed in any way, or how you can basically secure that. But I do know that we do obviously deposit raw data in overseas data storage service. And when we make the data available to collaborators, for example, there needs to be clear material transfer agreements where it's stated how the data will be handled. So there are clear guidelines as to how the data should be handled. I can try and find out more about the clinical research data and then basically communicate that to the person who asked the question. But yeah, personally, I've never had to deal with that.
But for example, if you publish one of the paper and then just publish the paper, and then some data you want to share, so usually this the data, so you will be keep storage at your university, or sometimes you have a goal to keep this data can be some of the outsource, some of the storage in the outside.
Yeah, it's a lot of our genomics and other omics data are quite big. So this is in the sense of almost 1 terabyte in size sometimes. So we can't store that at our local servers. And there are dedicated data storage servers where this can be deposited. And then basically it's like the case where you get an accession number for that particular data. And we then basically share that, or you get a DOI that we then basically link back to our CPT Isango data repository. So it can be accessible that way as well. But yes, there would be data that we have to submit to overseas data storage servers. And obviously we need to try and look at, we don't want to expose too much. So in terms of biodiscovery, we don't want to release genetic information that can be used by anyone. We need to be aware of what are the guidelines in terms of the depositing of genetic information. And there are a whole lot of different laws in South Africa that guides that particular aspect.
Yeah, okay, thank you for your sharing. So then we have another question, I guess, from the NTU. So this one, this question mostly regarding for are there any requirements from the funders to share the data or make this data available? So they do mention about the case in Hong Kong, but maybe first maybe I to see Professor Le Roes-Hill. Do you have any requirement from the funders in your country regarding for this shared data or make data available for the publication?
Yes, we do. So basically, not just for publication, it's for any projects that are funded by public funders or funding, basically. So we basically just deposit that data with our CPT data repository, and that link is then basically made available to our funders. But obviously, sometimes there is still data that's being generated or that you want to use in publication. So this is then where you can place an embargo on that data for a certain time period. This then allows you to do the publication, and then when the embargo is lifted, the data is freely available. So that is also allowed for the funders. But yes, we definitely need to make our data available. It is a requirement.
Yeah. So I think maybe Terry could be a bit some of the little add more. I guess in Hong Kong, our UGC, the funding agency, we are also very quickly we also require all this the fund project, usually fund the project and all these the PIs, and we will need to compromise with this the data the sharing. But they also have one particular question. Is there any national level platform to collect and share medical research data in Hong Kong and in mainland China? Terry, do you have some insight in this area?
Oh, unfortunately, I'm not familiar with like the national level platform,
But how
but
about
I think
local in Hong Kong region? We can maybe
so we
specify.
can use we can use the CHK one. Yeah, CHK have their own data repository, so it's also a good place to start with. And I think in terms of national level, I'm not pretty sure, but I think it will come soon. I think the funder will later like require us to have a data management plan for grant submission. It is not yet a requirement as for now, but I think they have talked about this for a few years and they are going to, I guess they want to implement it in the near future. So we have to like get prepared at least and to understand what that is, and at the time when the days really comes and then we can start using the data management plan. And also to one of the requirements would be to specify the data repository that we are going to use in the data management plan. And this is also very important because some of the data repository also require cost. So if you use some of those and make sure that you mention it and you can budget it in when you write your research proposal for getting the funding. Yeah.
So I think we can only refer to some of the case in Hong Kong. So in Hong Kong, we will soon have this requirement from the funding agency. But I think for some of the how to collect share the medical data across to at the national level, that in Hong Kong we are meaning there should be within the Chinese mainland, and then we have across the board. So here and then maybe some situation we are not also not very clear about these things. But in
That's
Hong
right,
Kong,
because that involve maybe cross-border data transfer. I think that would be another levels or another layers of our problem that we have to make sure that there's a good alignment between the national policy and also the Hong Kong policy about the data sharing. Yeah, so I think that would be something to additional to be developed. Yeah.
Yes, great. So, but Terry, can you share a little bit about one thing how about the you think the importance for the clinical research, and then regarding for the security issue, and then how you this, I think this is one of the important. That means when we have this data and then deposit, and then sometimes the data can be shared, and then how come do you have some of the policy and then to keep this security issue for the you have at the one way you can publish, and at the same time you keep some other security issue.
Yeah, so usually what we do now in our field is we have to have the data sharing statement. So in every of our publications, so we have to mention about how whether your data is openly available, or if not, who they can contact with in order to have a potential access or collaboration that can be using the data. So usually what we do now is we mention that if you want to use the data from Hong Kong, for example, so you have to contact our corresponding authors, and we will also have some like metadata as supplementary materials that we will when we submit our publication. So basically by reading the supplementary materials, the researcher will have a basic understanding what kind of data that we have, and from those metadata, they can understand whether those data can be helpful for their own projects. So if yes, usually we will receive some of the contact to whether they can access our data. But in order really to share the data, there's a lot to go. First of all, we have to establish the data transfer use agreement with their institution. So it takes some time, because those agreements are very important to make sure that first of all, we are not going to share any personal identifier. So patient cannot be identified from our data sets. And all the unnecessary personal information will not be shared. This is the first thing. And the second thing is to confirm that they are only going to use the data under a certain context. And when they have to publish anything using that data, they have to let us know at least, so they have to acknowledge everything. So that's why usually such an agreement will be needed in order to protect each of us, so that we have a safe use of the data. And then after the establishment of the agreement, we can think of how we can share the data with each other.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Terry. So I think we one thing we have mentioned before is we need to encourage the research, the postgrad student to participate for this the data management. But at the same time, we also need to encourage the research faculty member to also involve in the data management, and then they can be how they will be to share their raw data, and they also can encourage some of the collaboration even across the different discipline area. So Professor Le Roes-Hill, does CPT have any the incentive program or some scheme to encourage the faculty member to engage in this the data management?
No, not at the moment. We basically receive reminders from our library as well as from our research directorate to remind us about the value of basically making your raw data or your process data available. But there isn't really a incentivization for faculty members to do this, which at the moment I think is a big problem that we are facing, because it is an uphill battle sometimes to get faculty members to share their data. And basically, like I said, it requires sort of like a cultural shift that needs to take place, where people shouldn't see it as an administrative burden, but rather see it as part of their core scientific processes that they are involved in. But yeah, no, unfortunately, there's no such scheme currently at the CPUT. I don't know at Hong Kong. Is there one maybe there?
In our university, and then we have set up one of the we call it the data management committee, and then also this mostly they are led by under University of Library, and then we also have each faculty we have a representative to join the committee, and then we every year, and then we have sometimes regular meeting, and then to see how we can promote for this faculty or the student to engage in this data management. And then sometimes we also have some the incentive, some the small the internal funding, and then we can be assigned to each faculty, and then faculty can use this internal funding and then to encourage some of our faculty members and then to initiate some of this the data management project, and then later on, and then we have some of the support for this the data management development, and then later and then they can be the showcase of each of the faculty, and then see and then how this data management in each of the faculty, and then we have some of the sharing, and then Qin Qin in our the librarian in here, she also very active, and then the other thing we also have we have also appoint a lot of they call the data management champion for the student. We engage the PhD student, and then we have some of the training for them, and then some is the volunteer, and then they will be out of training, and then can help us, and then for going outside for the promotion. So I think these are a lot of the things, and then we need to go ahead and then to bet more these faculty members, and then also the student can be engaged. I think this is a very good incentive way, and then it's important area as we based on two of your sharing. I think this is important how we can the good data management, and we can use effective use of data, and it's better for the student research and then also for the collaboration in the different area.
Okay, that's
Let me
great. I
see.
see that it's been shared, the link. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for Qin Qin. Okay. So maybe we go to the I think the last question. I think, but I think some of you also have been mentioned, but they just shared two of you. Any of you have seen from your perspective, do you expect anything that means we can do more in the future, and then we can be better encourage or such kind of this data management planning for all the faculty members and students? Do you have some of the ideas, and then you can also some good incentive can share, and then maybe this is one way we can promote, or maybe it's Terry. Do you have some?
I think the existing policy or existing initiative by the CHK Library is also already very nice. So especially the data champion. So some of our postgraduate students, they also join the data champion. So aiming at like promoting good research data management within our school. And I think another thing is like what mentioned by Marilize would be the cultural change. So I think we have to understand this is not only an administrative burden as mentioned. So I think one of the usually my selling point to my colleagues would be it is one of the way that can make yourself visible or make your data visible to the others. So the others researcher in the same field will know that, oh, you have such a data, and you don't need to share the data at once. So you can just show the metadata, for example, so that the others will understand that you have such a data, and then if they are thinking of some potential collaboration, they can think of you because they already know that you have such a data. So I think this is serve as a bridge for communication and to facilitate research collaboration. So I think if we think of this way, I think hopefully that gives you more reason why you have to prepare such a thing called research data management plan, so that, and also to get a DMP ID, for example, so that the other can find you or can search you from the data repository. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that this Data Champions initiative that you have is really great. I think that's something that we can explore here at CPUT as well. But I think that maybe we should look at starting at the earlier stages. So here at CPT, it's mostly postgraduate students that are exposed to how to do a data management plan and how to do data management. So maybe we should start looking at the undergraduate students and basically incorporating it into their practical work, or into maybe giving them a small project or something like that, and make them share their data with their other students and see if the students can then use the data in a meaningful way, or anything like that maybe. But yeah, see, I don't have direct contact with undergraduate students, but this is something that will then greatly help by the time we get postgraduate students, that they're already aware of this practice and they don't see it as something new that they have to now learn and also try to incorporate along with their research project, and that they understand the importance of it.
Yeah, I think this is a great suggestion. That means we be earlier stage, even we can not at the research postgrad student, but need to extend to the undergrad student. We have a lot of undergrad students. They may be involved in some research or some of the undergrad research, and then at the early stage they can be also already have this mindset, and then this is important. All the data. Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you all two of the sharing, and then also the participate in this panel discussion. So I think now is the time is almost up, and I will be give back to Qing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Ngai for facilitating the session. Thank you so much, Professor Le Roes-Hill and Professor Yip for your sharing. I think we touch upon several very important topics today, and agree with your sharing. I feel like there's no one size fits all approach to research data management, and it works best when it's shaped by different disciplines and local contexts, as you all mentioned, like the different institutional or regional or national contexts here. So I think many of the practical workflows we mentioned and shared today can be adapted for other fields as well. So as what you shared earlier, which I really echo, is that rather than seeing RDM as just a compliance task or administrative burden, we should encourage researchers to view it as part of the core scientific discovery or scientific responsibility. So the process managing research data management can support collaboration, spark innovation, and create lasting impacts, with, of course, the libraries and institutions play an important and supportive role on the side. So thank you so much again for such an inspiring and thoughtful panel discussion. And thank you for your sharing earlier, Professor Le Roes-Hill and Professor Terry Yip. And thank you, Professor Ngai for facilitating the session. I would also like to thank everyone who joined us today for engaging in this online panel. Now we have reached the end of today's online panel. Thank you so much again, everyone, for joining us. Enjoy the rest of the day. Bye.